I had this long discussion at one point with Bezos on thinking about how you run, we were talking retail, because they're obviously a big retail competitor. And it is the focus on the inputs.
Pat Riley, who is the former coach of the LA Lakers, had this kind of mindset that when you start winning, that's the time to start getting back to the fundamentals.
Right.
That's the time you start putting pressure on, because now you're going to prepare for a potential storm.
Right.
And there's no way, as genius as all of us are, there's no way we can predict 2008 crash. And you talked about the financial system, and GE was a weekend away from going bankrupt at that time. Home Depot, like you said, had a culture that felt disrespected. You're coming in, you're rebuilding the trust from that standpoint. But it also has to shift to how the markets are and where the market was going. And obviously, Home Depot does really well when the residential markets are booming.
Right.
Beyond home improvements, you've got so many projects, the economy is doing, it's white hot. And nobody's saying, hey, we need to look at the fundamentals and prepare for a recession. Now, I don't really know what's going to happen next year or the year after, but we run scenarios. Sure, here's the game plan, but let's assume it all falls apart. Let's see what the threshold management of collapses for the organization, economy effects, and all these other things. Coming into 2008, before that time frame, did you have any game plans or ways that you ran through these kind of scenarios that if everything didn't work out as planned, how do you prepare for potential worst case scenarios?
I mean, I don't think you prepare for a worst case scenario as much as you figure out what it is you have to do a better job of what you're doing and what those 3 or 4 things are, with the confidence that if you do those, that may get knocked over in a downturn, but as long as you do that, you're going to be okay at the end. And I had this long discussion at one point before you went a little goofy with Bezos on thinking about how you run, we were talking retail, because they're obviously a big retail competitor. And it is the focus on the inputs. So what are the right inputs that need to happen for this business? The outputs may or may not happen because you've got recessions, weird stuff flying by you. But if you've got the right inputs and have flexibility around the inputs and understand how the inputs allow you to respond better to the customers, quicker to the customers, or whatever it might be, you'll be okay long term.
Yeah, I spent some time with Joe Rogers, the founder of Waffle House.
Yeah.
He's an amazing guy, and he's very pragmatic.
Yeah.
When you have a founder still involved, and Ken, Bernie, and Arthur are large shareholders of Home Depot during that time frame, you still have a little bit of the pressure of the founders, right? There's at least some kind of presence that's there. Maybe they're not doing any day-to-day stuff from that standpoint. But founder-led companies or founder-influenced companies are very different from, it's just another company, it's publicly traded, we're going to do it our way, here are the numbers, run it by the numbers, maybe we have a culture, whatever it is. Can you walk us through, as you're coming through 2008, and you're going through that whole experience, how does a culture, you said there's sometimes changes in cultures that need to happen, or the adaptability of the company through downturns, how do those components, because sometimes there's going to be a lot of fear, right? If we're going through a tough time in the company, there's this oh no, what's going to happen? What's my future? What's the feeling? We don't know what's going to happen. We see a lot of companies like Google, Microsoft, the biggest guys firing thousands of people on a constant basis in the technology. So there's going to be maybe fear within an organization. But there's also got to be that consistency that you said, that no matter what the situation is, you're going to stick to what the game plan is and how you're going to evolve. Any thoughts or perspectives during that time frame with the culture of the organization and those dynamics?
I mean, the culture part of it was important in the sense that there are things that had to change. But again, if you're respectful of the culture, people will understand the need for change, I think, if you can articulate it. It's making sure you're doing the right thing. It's making sure, how change is always unsettling, and to some extent, people will always fight the change, but you got to be able to lay out the case for it and explain why it's the right thing. And, for the most part, you'll get buy-in eventually. I mean, that was my experience.